I picked out what I thought was the ideal Mother's Day present for my stepmom, and then I watched her expression change as she figured out what it really meant. When Dad married Vanessa, I was just 11 years old. My mom had passed away 13 months earlier. Melanoma took her faster than anyone could have imagined. One day she was complaining about a headache, and less than 3 months later I found myself at her graveside, wearing a black dress that still had the price tags dangling from it. Dad waited exactly a year before he brought Vanessa into our home. She worked with him at his investment firm, handled client relations, always flashed a perfect smile, and had blonde hair that never seemed to move out of place. She was the type of woman who'd show up to someone else's backyard barbecue in high heels. "She makes me happy again," Dad told me, his voice soft but unyielding. "I need you to give her a chance, Grace." So I did my best. I helped Vanessa move her things in, hauling boxes of designer shoes into the closet where Mom's old gardening clothes used to be. I kept my mouth shut when she started rearranging the house, swapping out our family photos for abstract art that she said opened up the space. I even managed to smile when she tore out Mom's vegetable garden and put in a meditation patio, because apparently growing your own food was just too old-fashioned. For 3 years I played the part of the grateful stepdaughter. I went to her work events wearing the dresses she picked out for me. I put up with her friends who always gushed about how grown-up I was for 14. I kept my sadness tucked away behind straight A's and fake smiles. Dad never noticed when I stopped laughing. He was too wrapped up in Vanessa's social life and the new clients she kept bringing in, too busy with their couples getaways and wine tastings. Meanwhile, I slept with Mom's old sweater under my pillow until it finally lost her scent. Vanessa made her own attempts in her way. She bought me pricey birthday presents, always things she'd want for herself. She threw fancy dinner parties and introduced me as our daughter to important people who never remembered my name. She even set up a college fund for me, making sure everyone heard about her generosity. But when I got my first period, it was Google that taught me what to do. When I woke up from nightmares about Mom, it was the family dog who curled up beside me. Everything came to a head during my sophomore year. I landed the lead role in the school play, the first thing I'd cared about since Mom died. But opening night happened to fall on the same evening as Vanessa's big charity gala. "Obviously you'll have to miss the performance," she said, not even glancing up from her phone. "The Richardsons are bringing their son. He goes to Princeton. Connections, Grace." Dad started to protest but stopped when Vanessa put her hand on his arm. "It's just a high school play," he finally said. "There will be other chances." I went to my room and pulled out the old jewelry box Mom had left me. Inside was her wedding ring, a lock of my baby hair, and a journal I'd never dared to open, too scared to face her last words. That night, crying, I read every page. Most of it was what you'd expect. Her dreams for my future, memories she treasured, advice she wouldn't get to give me in person. But the final entry, written 2 weeks before she died, was different. "If you're reading this, Grace, I need you to know about the safe deposit box. The key is taped inside this cover. What you find there will change everything. I'm so sorry." The key was tiny and silver with the bank's name engraved on it. The next morning I skipped school and went straight to First National. The manager recognized me right away. Mom's family had been customers there for generations. "Your mother said you'd come one day," he told me, leading me back to the vault. Inside the box I found a USB drive, several folders stuffed with documents, and a letter addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. "My dearest Grace," it began. "By now Vanessa has probably become a big part of your lives. I've known about her for years." I read the whole letter twice, my hands trembling. Mom had discovered Dad's affair with Vanessa 6 months before she got sick. She'd hired a private investigator who tracked everything. Hotel receipts, text messages, photos of them together while Mom was picking me up from soccer practice. The investigator's report was thorough, covering months. There were pictures of Dad and Vanessa going into hotels in 3 different cities, screenshots of texts that made me feel sick. "She's taking Grace to her mother's this weekend. Come over. Can you imagine when we don't have to hide anymore? Sometimes I wish she would just disappear." That last one was from Dad, sent 4 months before Mom got sick. I flipped through credit card statements showing dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of on nights Dad said he was working late, receipts for jewelry that never ended up in Mom's collection, a lease agreement for an apartment downtown that wasn't in any of our family records. But there was even more. The files included financial records showing that Dad and Vanessa had been quietly moving money from Mom's family trust, funds meant for me, into offshore accounts. They'd been planning this for years, just waiting for the right time. Mom's family had built one of the city's biggest investment firms over 3 generations. When she married Dad, he was just an ambitious young advisor. She brought him into the business, mentored him, helped him make partner. The trust was her family's legacy, and I was supposed to be the one to carry it forward. I uncovered meticulous spreadsheets that tracked millions of dollars funneled through shell corporations, bogus client accounts, and manipulated investments. The money snaked its way through a dozen different countries before vanishing into anonymous, numbered accounts. Every crucial document bore Dad's signature, and Vanessa's name appeared on most of them as well. But the most devastating discovery was the medical records, which hinted that Mom's sudden decline might not have been as mysterious as we'd believed. There were odd test results, strange prescriptions, and toxicology reports she'd ordered on her own after she started to get suspicious. I started feeling off after our anniversary dinner, Mom had written. At first it was just fatigue, but then I got sicker and sicker. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. When I started keeping notes, I realized I only felt this way after meals Thomas made especially for me. There were lab results from hair samples, showing high levels of heavy metals that matched long-term poisoning, tests on food from our kitchen, and notes from 3 different specialists, each one remarking on how unusual her symptoms were. I can't prove any of this, Mom wrote, and by the time you read these words it won't matter for me. But I couldn't leave you without some protection. On the last page of her letter, Mom laid out her backup plan. She'd set up a second, secret trust in my name. The house and the business I'd always thought Dad controlled were actually mine once I turned 18. 2 weeks before she died, Mom had changed her will, working with lawyers Dad didn't even know about. I've made sure that what's rightfully yours stays yours, she wrote. The trustees will reach out to you automatically on your 18th birthday, but if you find this letter before then, you can contact them using the information in the envelope. They're ready whenever you are. I sat in that private room at the bank for hours, letting it all sink in. When I finally walked out, I wasn't the same person. The grief and confusion that had weighed me down for 3 years had hardened into something sharper, something with purpose. I didn't go straight to Dad. I didn't run away or call the cops. Instead, I did something that scared me even more. I became the model daughter. For the next 2 years I played my part perfectly. I got top grades, joined every club Vanessa suggested, and showed up at every boring corporate event. I wore the clothes they picked, said all the right things, and never once let on that I knew their secrets. At night I kept careful records of their ongoing schemes. Whenever Dad talked about a tricky client or a complicated investment at dinner, I'd dig into the companies he mentioned, tracing the money through their maze of fake businesses. I built my own spreadsheets, expanding on the work Mom had started. My bedroom turned into my headquarters. I installed a hidden safe behind my bookshelf, where I stored copies of everything I found. I recorded conversations at family dinners and business meetings they thought I wasn't paying attention to. I snapped photos of documents Dad left lying around, never suspecting his teenage daughter would understand what they meant. 6 months after I found Mom's letter, I finally felt ready to reach out to her trustees. The envelope held 3 business cards. One for a forensic accountant, one for a lawyer who specialized in financial crimes, and one for a retired judge who had been my grandfather's closest friend. I met them at the judge's house on a Saturday, telling Dad and Vanessa I was at debate practice. I'd already explained everything over the phone, but seeing their reactions as they looked through the evidence was something else. The accountant closed his eyes for a moment when he realized how deep the fraud went. The lawyer muttered a curse under her breath. The judge looked at me with a mix of sorrow and steely anger. "Your mother was one of the best people I've ever known," he said quietly. "What do you want to do, Grace?" I'd spent months thinking about my choices. I could have blown the whole thing open right away, sending Dad and Vanessa to jail. I could have disappeared, waiting until I turned 18 to claim what was mine. I could have confronted them, demanding answers. But instead I decided to follow the path Mom had started. Slow, careful justice. "I want to learn everything," I told them. "I want to understand the business, finance, the law, and how to run a company. I want to be ready when it's time to take it all back." The judge just nodded like he'd expected that answer. "Your mother said you'd want that. She left us instructions in case you chose this road." For a year and a half I balanced 2 lives. At home and at school, I played the role of the accomplished daughter Vanessa loved to show off at every gathering. But 3 nights a week I slipped away to what everyone thought were study groups or volunteer shifts, when in reality I was deep in training with my secret team. The forensic accountant taught me how to dissect financial statements, spot fraud, and untangle the complicated network of transactions that kept our family business afloat. The lawyer schooled me in corporate law, contracts, and the legal strategies I'd need to eventually take control. The judge introduced me to his network: bankers, investors, regulators, people who had admired my mom and were appalled by what had happened to her legacy. At the same time, I worked closely with Mom's lawyers, getting everything in order: the trust, the evidence, the plan. I finished high school at 16, a year ahead of schedule. Dad and Vanessa were over the moon, their golden child heading off to Yale early, full scholarship in hand. What they didn't realize was that I'd also been taking online business and finance classes, learning the ins and outs of Dad's company and the supposedly hidden accounts. "We're so proud of you," Dad said at my small graduation party, just family and a handful of their friends. No classmates, no one who actually knew me. "You've gone above and beyond what we ever hoped for," Vanessa chimed in, wrapping her arm around me for the photographer they'd hired. "Yale early admission. The board can't wait to see what you'll do for the firm." I smiled and thanked them, all the while knowing that in less than 2 years, I'd be the one running that boardroom. The summer before college, Vanessa made an announcement. She wanted to adopt me officially. "You're my daughter in every way that matters," she said, reaching across the table to touch my cheek during lunch at her favorite overpriced bistro. "Let's make it official before you head off to school." I watched her closely, searching for any real emotion. There was a tightness around her eyes, a flicker of calculation as she glanced at Dad before looking back at me. This wasn't about love, it was about shoring up her own position. If I became her adopted daughter, her claim to the family business would be stronger if anything ever happened to Dad. I smiled, hugged her, and whispered that nothing would make me happier. "We should celebrate," Dad said, already waving for the check. "Maybe a weekend in the Hamptons. We could invite the Prestons, their sons at Harvard Law." "That sounds great," I replied, thinking about the file I'd put together on the Prestons' struggling software company and the mysterious cash injection it got from one of Dad's shell companies last year. That night, I called an emergency meeting with my trustees. We gathered in the judge's study, surrounded by shelves of old books, after I told Dad and Vanessa I was spending the night at a friend's to celebrate graduation. "They want me to sign adoption papers," I explained. "Will that mess up our plan?" The lawyer spread out documents across the polished table. "Actually, this could work to our advantage. The adoption process requires financial disclosures. We'll get a fresh look at their assets. And your mother's trust is untouchable. That's locked down tight." "How close are we?" I asked. The accountant pushed his glasses up his nose. "We've tracked down 67% of the missing money, following it through 4 countries to accounts we can name. That's more than enough for criminal charges." "And the evidence about your mom's illness?" the judge asked, his voice gentle. That was the hardest part for me, the idea that Dad might not have just betrayed Mom but actually poisoned her. The medical experts we'd consulted couldn't say for sure it was murder, but the pattern was suspicious enough to warrant an investigation. "We keep that separate for now," I decided. "One fight at a time." As I got ready to leave, the judge handed me a small wrapped box. "Your mother left this for you with instructions to give it to you when you were ready to move forward." Inside was a vintage Mont Blanc pen that had belonged to my grandfather. "She used this to sign her first big deal," the judge told me. "She wanted you to have it when you were ready to reclaim what's yours." After that night, I carried that pen everywhere, a symbol, a promise I intended to keep. 2 weeks later, Mother's Day rolled around. Vanessa always turned it into a spectacle. Fancy brunches, professional photographers to capture her mother-daughter moments for social media. This year, she planned a garden party for 30 of their closest friends, with the adoption announcement as the main event. I spent the week before the party working late into the night, putting together my gift, organizing documents, assembling evidence, crafting the perfect presentation. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was by far the most thoughtful gift I'd ever made for her. The morning of the party was bright and mild, exactly the kind of day Vanessa had hoped for. The caterers showed up at 7, followed by florists, event planners, and a small army of staff who transformed our backyard into a polished venue that looked nothing like the wild, beautiful garden Mom had once loved. I found Vanessa in her dressing room, surrounded by a sea of discarded dresses. "Which one do you like better?" she asked, holding up 2 nearly identical cream dresses. "The Dior or the Chanel?" "Go with the Chanel," I replied, noticing how she immediately tossed aside the Dior, the one I'd picked out. "I actually have something for you," I added, handing her a box wrapped in silver ribbon. "Oh, Grace, you didn't have to," she said, her surprise almost believable. We both knew I'd never given her a Mother's Day present before. I wanted to. Especially for today's big announcement. She set the box on her vanity. "I'll open it later during the party. It'll be more special that way." "I'd really prefer you open it now," I said, my voice steady. "It's personal." She paused, studying my face, then reached for the box. Inside was a custom-bound book, the cover stamped in gold. "A Daughter's Gratitude." "Oh, Grace," she breathed, clearly expecting a scrapbook of sweet memories and heartfelt notes. Her hands shook a little as she opened it. The first page was a photo of Mom smiling before she got sick. "What is this?" she asked, her voice suddenly tight. "Keep going," I said softly. "It gets interesting." Page after page, the book laid out the story Mom had left for me. Hotel receipts, bank records, medical files, each one carefully annotated in my handwriting. I watched her face shift as she read, confusion turning to shock, then anger, then outright fear. By the time she reached the section on the stolen trust funds, sweat had started to streak her makeup. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, but she couldn't stop turning the pages. The final section detailed the new trust, the legal actions already underway, and the meeting scheduled for tomorrow with the FBI's financial crimes team. "Those offshore accounts you and Dad set up?" I said, sounding casual as I perched on the edge of her vanity. "They're not as invisible as you thought. Did you know that in the last 5 years, 17 countries have signed new banking transparency laws? Or that every wire transfer leaves a digital trail that can be matched to your phone's location?" Her face went pale. "You and Dad are going to be very interested in the deal I'm offering," I finished, still smiling as the doorbell rang downstairs, signaling the first guests. "It's a much better option than prison." She stood up so fast she knocked over her mimosa. "You ungrateful little..." "Careful," I whispered. "Your guests are watching and I haven't decided yet if I'll show them what's in chapter 3. She glanced down at the book, still open to a page showing her text to Dad from the week Mom was in the hospital. Messages complaining about visiting hours getting in the way of their dinner plans. "What do you want?" she hissed, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. "You're going to go downstairs and host your party. You'll smile, laugh, and be the perfect hostess. And tomorrow at 9 sharp, you and Dad will meet me at Judge Whitaker's office to talk about the terms for your continued freedom." Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape. Finding none, she muttered, "This is blackmail." "No," I told her. "This is justice with a little mercy if you earn it." I headed for the door. "You've got 30 seconds to fix your makeup. People are waiting." The party dragged on for 3 long hours. Vanessa kept her composure, hands trembling and a smile frozen on her face. I played the loving daughter, raising a toast to her influence in my life, watching her flinch at every double meaning only we understood. "Grace has been such a blessing," Vanessa told Mrs. Whitaker, the judge's wife. "I couldn't love her more if she were my own." "And Vanessa has taught me a lot," I replied, meeting her eyes. "About loyalty. About consequences." Mrs. Whitaker looked between us, picking up on the tension but not quite sure what it meant. "Well, you two are clearly wonderful for each other." Dad texted that he was running late from golf just as well. His own gift was waiting in his office. A matching book with extra documents detailing his part in the fraud. As the afternoon faded, guests trickled out, complimenting Vanessa on the party and congratulating me on Yale. I stood by her side at the door, accepting hugs from women who smelled like expensive perfume and anxiety, shaking hands with men who'd known my grandfather but couldn't quite place my name. "Is everything okay with Vanessa?" one of Dad's partners asked quietly. "She seems a little on edge." "Oh, she's just emotional about the adoption," I said smoothly. "Today's a big deal for her." Once the last guest left, Vanessa vanished upstairs. 20 minutes later, I found her in her room, frantically stuffing clothes into a suitcase. Heading somewhere? I asked, leaning against the doorway. She spun around, clutching a handful of jewelry, her eyes wild. You can't prove any of this. It's all circumstantial. The FBI disagrees. So does the SC, but if you want to run, go ahead, they're expecting it. There's been an agent parked at the end of our street for 3 days now. That was a total bluff. I hadn't involved the authorities yet. Keeping them out was part of my leverage. But Vanessa didn't know that. She slumped onto the bed, her suitcase half packed and forgotten. So what happens now? She asked, her voice small. Now we wait for Dad. Then we talk about your options. Dad showed up about an hour later, calling for Vanessa as he came in. I met him in the foyer holding his own copy of the evidence. Where's Vanessa? How was the party? He asked, loosening his tie. She's upstairs. But you should open this first. I watched as he flipped through the book, his face shifting through the same emotions I'd seen on Vanessa, shock, disbelief, then a cold, lawyerly calm. He didn't say a word until he finished, then looked up at me, his expression impossible to read. Where did you get all of this? Mom left it for me, along with instructions on what to do. For a split second I saw something like pain cross his face, but he buried it fast. Grace, whatever you think you know, is backed up in triplicate and stored in secure places, I cut in. Including evidence about Mom's illness that points to more than just financial crimes. He went pale. You can't honestly believe I poisoned her. I don't know. The evidence isn't conclusive, but it's enough to start an investigation if I want to. He closed the book slowly, like it might bite him. What do you want? The same thing I told Vanessa. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, Judge Whitaker's office. We'll talk about how you can both avoid prison. Later that night, after everyone had left, I found Vanessa sitting alone in the dark, out in what used to be Mom's garden. She was surrounded by the cold, white patio furniture she'd picked out to replace the wildflowers. Why now? She asked, staring straight ahead. Why wait so long? I sat down next to her, smoothing my dress over my knees. Mom taught me patience. I needed to know everything before I acted. What do you want, Vanessa? I'd pictured this moment for years, expecting to feel triumphant, maybe even happy. But sitting there with the woman who'd helped ruin my family, I just felt empty. Dad signs over control of the company to me using the original trust. You both resign in public but stay on as consultants under my supervision. All the money you took goes back into the trust. In return, I don't press charges. She let out a bitter laugh. You're 16. You can't run a company. I'll be 17 soon, and I've got Mom's trustees behind me. I've been preparing for this for years. I heard Dad's footsteps coming across the patio. Vanessa's hands gripped the armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. He'll never agree to this, she said. I stood up, adjusting the necklace Mom had left me. He already has. Check your phone. While we'd been talking, Dad had found his own copy of my Mother's Day present. His message to Vanessa was short and to the point. She knows everything. Dad stepped out onto the patio, his face drawn and tired in the last bit of daylight. You didn't have to do it like this, he said softly. You could have just come to me. Like Mom did. I shot back. When she confronted you about Vanessa, or when she started asking questions about the trust. How did those honest conversations turn out for her? He didn't have an answer. He tried a different angle. The company isn't just numbers and contracts. It's built on relationships, on trust. If you force us out, you could destroy everything. That's already been handled, I cut in. Mom's original team is ready to take over. Most of them never trusted you anyway. They only stayed out of respect for her. Vanessa glared at him. You told me they were loyal to you. That you had their support. He lied, I told her. Just like he lied about the prenup you signed, the one with the infidelity clause. If you file for divorce, you walk away with nothing. She whipped her head toward him. What prenup? I have a copy, I said, along with proof you've been seeing Tyler Brooks from legal. Did you really think those hotel bills wouldn't show up in the audits? Her face went pale. Dad's confusion turned to anger as the truth hit him. You told me that was over, he snapped. It is, she insisted, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Grace is playing you, he said, voice tight. No, that's your move, I replied, standing up. I'm just being direct. 9 o'clock tomorrow. Don't be late and don't try to run. I have people watching the house. I left them out there, their angry voices trailing after me as I went inside. In my room, I called Judge Whitaker to confirm our meeting, then sent the full dossier to my trustees with instructions to send it to the authorities if I didn't check in by noon. I barely slept. I lay awake listening to their muffled arguments, the sound of something breaking, a door slamming. Around 3 in the morning I heard a car start and drive off. By sunrise the house was quiet. I dressed carefully for the meeting, a conservative suit Mom had picked out for my first academic competition, her pearl earrings, barely any makeup. I wanted to look serious, older, in control. When I came downstairs, Dad was alone at the kitchen island, staring into his coffee, still in yesterday's clothes. "Where's Vanessa?" I asked, though I already knew. "Gone," he said, his voice flat. "Took her jewelry in the car. Left her phone behind so she couldn't be tracked. I'd planned for this. It complicates things but it doesn't change the outcome. She was never the main player." He looked up at me, his eyes red and hollow. "You look just like her," he said quietly. "Your mother. When she was fighting for something." That hit me in a way I wasn't expecting, both comforting and painful. "We should go. The judge doesn't like to be kept waiting." The meeting was short but thorough. Dad, stripped of his usual bravado, signed every document. Power of attorney, transfer of voting rights, resignation. Judge Whitaker walked him through each step, his tone neutral but his eyes cold. "You understand these terms depend on your full cooperation with the recovery team. If you try to hide assets or interfere, we'll file the criminal charges." Dad nodded, barely looking up. "And the company announcement will follow the script we've provided. It'll be about family succession and honoring Margaret's legacy." Another nod. "Sign here. And here. Initial these." When it was over, Judge Whitaker slid one last document across the table. "This says you won't contact Grace directly until she turns 18. All communication goes through my office or the trustees." Dad's head jerked up. "What? She's my daughter, you can't." "Sign it," I said quietly, "or I release the medical evidence." His hand shook as he signed. When he set down the pen, Mom's Montblanc, which I'd brought just for this, his shoulders sagged and he suddenly looked years older. "Can I at least explain?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've read all your explanations," I told him. "They're in your emails to Vanessa, in the memos justifying the transfers, in the statement you wrote for the board last year, where you described me as a potential figurehead, but not someone with real authority. I think I get the picture." Judge Whitaker wrapped up the meeting, letting Dad know a car was waiting to take him to a hotel. He'd be allowed back at the house next week, but only under supervision to collect his things. As Dad stood up, he paused next to me. "Your mother would be proud," he said, and I couldn't tell if it was meant as praise or a warning. "I know," I replied, keeping my voice steady. 2 months later, I sat at the head of the conference table in what used to be Dad's office. The company's transition was announced as a family succession, complete with press releases about me being the youngest female CEO in the industry. Dad stayed on as a figurehead, but ironclad contracts kept him on a short leash, monitoring every financial move he made. He got to keep the house and his reputation, and he stayed out of prison. In exchange, I got what was rightfully mine, plus his total compliance with quarterly reviews where I went over every detail of his work. The trustees became my executive team, guiding me through the endless decisions needed to steady the company after years of his mismanagement. I put off Yale for a year, throwing myself into learning the business from the inside out. Vanessa turned up in Miami 3 weeks after she ran. The FBI caught her trying to access one of the flagged offshore accounts. She spent 2 nights in jail before Dad's lawyers got her out in exchange for her full cooperation. She came back to Connecticut under strict supervision, living in a company-owned condo and working as a client liaison with almost no real authority. The prenup I'd mentioned turned out to be prophetic. Dad filed for divorce, citing abandonment and infidelity, and she walked away with only what the separation agreement allowed. She tried to fight it, threatening to blow the whistle on the company's fraud, until my lawyers reminded her she'd be the first one charged. It wasn't justice for Mom. Nothing could ever be. But it was a start, what she'd wanted for me. Control over my own future, protection for the legacy she built, and consequences for those who betrayed her. I kept searching for answers about Mom's illness. I hired specialists to re-examine tissue samples the hospital had saved, ordered new tests on items from her vanity I'd kept untouched, and interviewed the medical staff who'd cared for her. The results were always the same, suspicious but never conclusive. Dad stuck to his story even in private meetings with his lawyers where he admitted to everything else. The cancer was real, he told me. I never touched her medicine, never tampered with her food. I wanted her gone. Yes, I'll admit I wished her dead, but I didn't make it happen. I wasn't sure what to believe. Part of me wanted him to be guilty of everything so I could hate him without regret. Another part needed to believe he hadn't crossed that final line, to hold on to some small piece of the father I used to love. Under new management, the company thrived. We untangled Dad's mess, recovered most of the stolen money, and rebuilt trust with clients he'd nearly lost. I worked 16-hour days, sleeping on the office couch more than in my own bed. The house never felt like home again. 6 months after taking over, I sold it and moved into a downtown apartment close to the office. Dad moved to a smaller place in the suburbs, cut off from his old friends and country club after the company's statement made it clear he'd been forced out. Last week, I visited Mom's grave for the first time since reading her letter. I did what you asked, I said, laying wildflowers on her stone. The company's safe. Your legacy is protected. I wish you could see it. As I turned to leave, I spotted a familiar figure at a distance, Vanessa, holding a small bouquet of her own. Our eyes met across the cemetery. She didn't come over, just nodded once and walked away. Some lessons take years to learn. Some gifts keep giving long after they're unwrapped. Every Mother's Day since, I send Vanessa the same thing. A single photo of Mom smiling in her garden with a note that says, "Thinking of you today." She never replies, but I know she gets it. It's the only language we have left.